Welcome to the Young Turks First Hour. John and Anna here. Thanks, Anna, for joining me on the First Hour.
Hey,
it's always
gonna
awesome
be good.
to have you on the First Hour.
I'm looking forward to both hours of the show today. We have some pretty solid stories.
Yeah.
I have to say, though, my favorite story of the day is in the first hour, and it's about the pussification of Popeye. It's a very serious issue that we need to discuss on the Young Turks. Fox News addressed it, and we have a counterpoint to it.
Yeah. Well, already right off the bat, I love that you went with pussification. Fox News, who says they hate PC culture, they wouldn't even say that. They say wussification. You just went right past them.
I did, yeah.
Yeah, but lots of big news. Obviously, there's going to be some international news since we've engaged with ISIS, but we've also got some great shenanigans, as Anna alluded to, on Fox News. We've got a little look back in time to Rand Paul during his days going through college. And also, we've got an interesting sort of consequence, I believe, of what happened in Ferguson, Missouri, just a couple of weeks ago. All that we're going to cover in the first hour.
All right.
Yeah, and also, by the way, as we go through these, I always try to remind everyone, of course, tweet us at hashtag TYT Live, and when we come back from break, then we can read some of them. Name can be said on the show. But let's start off in Syria. The US-led anti-ISIS coalition has launched its first strikes in Syria. Now, of course, we had been engaging in some limited airstrikes in Iraq for about a little bit over a week, but now we have struck multiple targets in Syria, cities west of Aleppo, and a general of the U.S. military is saying that this is only the beginning. Of course, we have more details. The strikes were by the U.S. We also had multiple allies in the region who helped us out with those strikes, including Bahrain, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, and the United Arab Emirates. 4 different cities in Syria were struck. I believe we have some footage of the strikes and the aftermath, which we'll show you. You're going to see there the typical video gamey look at what war looks like in 2014 as those strikes go in. 4 different ISIS-held cities were targeted, including Raqqa, which ISIS has indicated is its operational headquarters in Syria, Deir el-Zur, Hasaka, and Abu Kamal, all struck. And you're seeing there, obviously, quite a few cities held by ISIS in Syria right now, stretching through the north and the east of that country. We also know there were about 8 strikes at that point against another terrorist organization, which we'll tell you a little bit more about in due time. And we have confirmations that some civilians were killed during those airstrikes, which took place throughout late yesterday and the night. So what's your initial reaction to us moving beyond Iraq into Syria as we've promised we would?
Well, I just find it interesting that now at this point we have done airstrikes or have engaged in some sort of military action against Afghanistan, Pakistan, Yemen, Somalia, Libya, Iraq. In the case of us fighting against ISIS in Syria and doing these airstrikes, of course, as you know, Obama did this without congressional authorization. There are constitutional issues to that, but no one really seems to be discussing it. And if you really want to talk about our foreign policy as a whole and whether or not it's been effective, what I fail to understand is we launched a preemptive war back in 2003. Okay, that preemptive war and our counterterrorism efforts have not been successful, to say the least. If anything, we've only made matters worse. So this is an extension of failed foreign policy, which enrages me beyond belief, because here's what doesn't happen in the Middle East, okay? U.S. aggression doesn't lead to less terrorists. U.S. aggression has led to more recruitment among terrorist groups, including ISIS. So The Intercept reported about how these current airstrikes have actually increased recruitment to ISIS considerably. So what we're doing right now, I mean, look, it's probably too soon to make a definitive or a declaration of a failed attempt or whatever it is, but I don't think that this is the type of foreign policy that's going to lead to good results. I think that this is the U.S.'s effort to engage in perpetual war because we have people that are making a lot of money by remaining in war.
Yeah, I think the only outcome that will not come about as a result of this is that one ISIS fighter will crawl atop of the rubble and wave a white flag.
It's not
Nobody sees that happening except perhaps Bill O'Reilly. And yeah, as you said, of course it's led to increased recruitment. That we've been saying that was going to happen. We know that's an expected outcome. It's like the truth that shall not be named amongst the mainstream press, though. For some reason, the idea that if you bomb these people, they'll find it easier to rally people to their cause. For some reason, that's unspeakable for the press. But one thing that we do have to point out, that thankfully this was discussed quite a bit, I believe Vox had a short talk about it, this is undoubtedly, while not yet a win for us, is clearly a win for the Assad regime, because it wasn't that long ago, before we went in and dismantled, for the most part, their chemical weapons capabilities in Syria, that we were considering as a country going in and bombing Assad to hell. And yet now we're going in and we're taking out his enemies, the rebels that are fighting against him in Syria. And so he has to be like slow clapping at the very least.
And what's also incredible is, in the past, when we have given rebels weapons, it hasn't really worked to our favor, right?
No.
And in this case, in our efforts to fight ISIS, first of all, we're working with Saudi Arabia, which does its own beheadings, right? Which has its own questionable way of governing its people, right? But we're working with them in an effort to fight ISIS. At the same time, we're arming rebels in Syria, about 5,000 of them. And not only are we arming them, we're training them in order to help us fight ISIS. I don't see how that is not going to come back and bite us in the butt sometime in the future, because that's what always tends to happen. So really, you know, this is an isolated case, right? What I would really want to look at is U.S. foreign policy as a whole, and how our actions and how our aggression abroad has led to the type of hostility that we're seeing toward the United States. First of all, there's absolutely no indication that ISIS is an imminent threat to the United States. Nonetheless, President Obama decided to go after ISIS without congressional authorization. So what is the role of our military? Is the role of our military to defend the United States, or are we now on the offense? Are we now going around policing other countries and making decisions that we honestly have no reason to make decisions for?
It's some weird amalgam of both. I don't think anyone knows exactly how wide this will spread. But yeah, I love what you said earlier about the fact that ISIS came about basically as a result of this strategy, the 10 years ago version of it. Of course, ISIS coming about as a result of the defeat of al-Qaeda in Iraq. Al-Qaeda would not have been in Iraq if we hadn't destabilized the country by taking out the Saddam Hussein regime. And so, of course, the last time we went through this in the Middle East, ISIS is the outcome. I don't know what cool acronym terrorist organization will come about as a result of the attacks that we just launched last night, but I have a feeling they're probably going to be bad mofos. And I don't know that I want to unleash them on the region. But the strikes against ISIS were not the only strikes that took place last night. We also, just the U.S., not with our Arab allies, launched 8 different airstrikes against the Khorasan terrorist organization. Now, if you haven't heard about this, you're not alone. Almost no one outside of members of the intelligence community and some elected representatives for the U.S. government had heard about it prior to about last week. But we do know a little bit about it. It operates in Syria. It's believed to have about 50 active members, and it's under the protection of Jabhat al-Nusra, which is an al-Qaeda affiliate in Syria. They're led by a guy named Muhsin al-Fadli, and they're considered to be particularly deadly because they have talked about launching attacks against Western targets, including the United States, and it's believed that they have been working with one of the lead bomb makers for al-Qaeda, and so it's believed that they will have advanced IED capabilities. We have a couple of quotes from Pentagon spokespeople giving a little bit of information about this organization, which previously we hadn't known about. This is from Rear Admiral John Kirby saying, "We had very good indications that this group, which is a very dangerous group, was plotting and planning imminent attacks against Western targets, to include the U.S. homeland, and it was on that basis that we struck targets, Khorasan targets, inside Syria." He goes on to say, "We believe that the individuals that were plotting and planning it had been eliminated, and we're going to continue to assess the effectiveness of our strikes going through today." Now, back to what I was saying about their working with former al-Qaeda bomb makers. A counterterrorism official anonymously said, they're taking the knowledge of al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula's master bomb maker and experimenting with their own designs for undetectable IEDs, that being improvised explosive devices. And as I alluded to, very few, including politicians, were aware of the existence or the threat posed by Khorasan prior to these strikes. One is Representative Peter King, who said, "Congress has known about it for several months. I'm surprised the name even came out. It was supposed to be top secret, classified, and it wasn't until last week that an AP story had it in there. But we weren't supposed to talk about it. The intelligence community has known about it, that they are extremely lethal." and dangerous.
So let's stop right there with that quote, because I think that, you know, the mentality that Congress has and the mentality that the executive branch has is really fascinating when it comes to any type of unilateral action abroad, right? When it comes to times of war, not only do I think that we should engage in war only to defend national security here in the United States, but I also think that public opinion is extremely important, right? But public opinion has been taken out of it completely, right? It's not even a part of the decision-making process. And at the same time, we now have members of Congress that also don't play a role. What I find fascinating is, again, Obama decided to do the airstrikes and his entire strategy against ISIS without congressional authorization, right? But how is that okay? How is it that you ignore public opinion and at the same time you ignore Congress when you go against a terrorist group that doesn't really pose an imminent threat to the United States? Now, if ISIS does pose an imminent threat to the United States, tell me why. Tell me how. Then maybe you'll drum up public support. And look, there are some polls indicating that people are in favor of doing airstrikes against ISIS, right? But a lot of that has to do with fear-mongering that you see in the mainstream press. Now, the beheadings, in my opinion, were more about provoking U.S. military action against ISIS because they knew that that would strengthen their base. That would strengthen them with more recruitment. That's exactly what has happened. So we're doing exactly what ISIS wants us to do. But at the same time, we're also doing exactly what private contractors and weapons manufacturers want us to do. This perpetual war that makes people wealthy in this country.
Oh, that's a great point by you about having to justify the imminent threat that they keep implying. They keep alluding to this threat. And I think that that's why Khorasan is suddenly, you know, the most dangerous organization operating in Syria, because they have to say, look, we can't prove that ISIS is trying to kill us in America right now, but Khorasan, they were super deadly. They have advanced Iron Man IEDs and stuff like that. So I think that's why they were making the case. And that's why I do question it a little bit. I mean, this organization that previously almost no one, even in Congress, had heard about, is suddenly this massive threat without any indication given to their capacity to get either their members or their weapons into the United States. It seems like they were probably bombed pretty effectively. That's what they want us to believe. So it's difficult to even have someone go in and report on it and find out if they're a real threat. It seems very convenient.
It's just surprising to me that Peter King is not in favor of the public knowing about this big, scary threat. Right? It seems like he was shocked and surprised that all of a sudden there are reports about this, like, oh, no one should be talking about it. The U.S. should unilaterally, you know, launch a war against this particular al-Qaeda-linked terrorist group, but the public shouldn't know about it. I mean, what's the point of a democratic process then?
Yeah, and so back to what you said about the authorization, it was a very interesting process because Obama came out after being called a wuss and like he didn't have a plan against ISIS, and he came out and said, look, I've already got the authorization I need from 60 years ago or after the September 11th attacks. But then he did try to get the authorization, and Congress and the Senate did okay it as part of a continuing resolution, almost as if they were trying to hide their support for it. And I don't think at this point Republicans or Democrats really know exactly where they want to be seen to stand, because the Republicans definitely want us to go more all out than Obama is currently doing, but they also don't want to be seen to be supporting the president. And so it's an interesting situation, and I don't know if you were to leave it directly up to the people, if you could do that, if you would want to, because we did cover last week recent polls that show that the American people right now massively, overwhelmingly support Republicans to defend us from terrorism and international conflict over Democrats. Look, we know right now what the Democratic plan looks like. I don't like it. I have a feeling I'd like the Republican plan a lot less.
I absolutely agree.
Yeah. Okay, but let's look at a plan that we like even less than what the Republicans are supporting right now. Bill O'Reilly has a plan to defeat ISIS. He only launched it a couple of days ago, and it's already being described as bold and aggressive and illegal and immoral. But I will let him lay out the case for you, and then we will respond.
I don't know about you, but I'm tired of the phony rhetoric surrounding the ISIS terror threat. I am also tired of hearing the phrase boots on the ground. Finally, I am tired of being misled by the Obama administration. Here is the truth. Syrian moderates cannot defeat the ISIS terror group. Let me repeat. Even if the USA trains Syrian moderates and gives them weapons, they will not be able to defeat the terrorists. So, we need ground forces. However, the American people, perhaps rightly so, don't want to send any more of our troops into these chaotic countries. But what about a mercenary army? Elite fighters who would be well paid, well trained to defeat terrorists all over the world.
So we're gonna show you a clip in just a minute where he's gonna describe more in detail all of the thinking that he's been doing before he went on air and described this plan. But I love the idea that we can't send over Americans. He sort of concedes that. Mm-hmm. He doesn't think the Syrian rebels, can defeat ISIS there. But if we only bring them here and train them, then all of a sudden they'll be far more capable and more able to defeat ISIS. And by the way, I understand I'm jumping ahead. Jesus, if you could get video 7 ready. So this is a guy who's going to lay out exactly how to defeat an unprecedented and interesting amalgam of terrorist tactics and some state building that they're doing in Iraq right now. What military experience does O'Reilly have that he understands the inner workings of both the U.S. military, the Syrian rebels that he's never met or worked with, and ISIS? Here he's going to describe the experience he has with the military.
I'll tell you what. No, I covered
Bill,
4 wars with a pen.
And an arrogant idiot.
All right, cut him off. Cut him off. He's a jerk. I covered 4 wars with a pen. Okay? So don't impugn my courage ever again. You're a weasel.
I absolutely love that. So he's covered 4 wars with a pen, and if you don't think that's enough military experience, you are a weasel.
What I find interesting is if he did cover 4 wars with a pen, then he would know that military aggression or U.S. aggression or military aggression in general, because these are mercenary fighters, they're not necessarily American fighters, right? Doesn't necessarily lead to the results that you want when it comes to counterterrorism.
Anna,
right?
Don't impugn his courage.
But I think that it plays into the narrative that his audience is in favor of, right? They're a bunch of paranoid, scared people. Yeah. They think that the country is facing an imminent threat, and as a result of buying into that propaganda, they want to hear from pundits and also politicians who think, oh my God, we're going to go out there and we're going to be strong and we're going to fight and we're going to bomb countries and It doesn't work. It doesn't work. That type of aggression has only made matters worse. Yeah. But it's O'Reilly. What does he know? Yeah. I don't take anything.
He covered 4 wars.
He's an entertainer.
Yeah. Now, look,
but he's tired. Just keep that in mind.
He's very tired of Obama misleading you, and now it is his turn. Yeah. So as I said, we're going to break apart the mercenary plan, but first, how is it going to work logistically and in terms of funding? Take it away, Bill O'Reilly.
These guys, there's just a million of them. They just pop up, whether it's Yemen or Somalia or here or there, and you just can't have this unwieldy apparatus saying, well, maybe we'll get them, but maybe we have to go over here. You have to have a... Here's how it would work. The fighters would be recruited by America and trained in the USA by our special forces. U.S. Army rules of engagement would be followed. Strict discipline formed by the Geneva Convention. America would be in charge of selecting who makes the cut and how they are deployed, with an eye on a 25,000-person force. American and NATO officers would lead the mercenary army, and the USA would also provide logistical support, basing the first trained soldiers in Kurdistan. The force would be called the Anti-Terror Army, and the cost paid by the coalition that President Obama is trying to put together. That means all countries that want intelligence and protection from the USA and NATO would have to chip in. If they don't pay, they get no help. The elite force would be English-speaking. And because paychecks would be issued, soldiers currently in armed forces around the world would not be eligible. Only American and NATO officers in command would be exempt from that. Each soldier would sign a contract, a 3-year commitment, and again, they would be highly paid. Finally, it would help a lot if the U.S. Congress would formally declare war on terrorism.
We're going to break apart every part of that, but how would that help a lot? Would they fire more accurately if they knew that we had a formal declaration of war against a military tactic, a principle? Like, what does that even mean?
I don't think he's really thought it through. Of course, it goes against international law. This is not something that's going to happen, right? And I don't like the idea of a group of people going around the world and policing the activities of every single country. Look, am I sitting here saying that ISIS or any other Al-Qaeda linked terrorist group is good? Hell no. Of course they're dangerous, they're terrible people, but our policy against them hasn't worked. Yeah. How long do we have to go with drone strikes, air strikes, whatever it is, to prove that it's just not effective, that it only makes matters worse? And so whatever he's proposing right now, let's say in his perfect world where it doesn't go against international law and we can do it, it's not going to be successful. It's
well, no, but that's exactly what makes it so novel.
Yeah.
Like our current strategy has been working, so we need to turn to something else, something from the 14th century or Game of Thrones. Like his plan is the same as Viserys Targaryen. We're just going to send the Dothraki over there; they'll take care of it.
Yeah.
That's not boots on the ground. Look, every part of this is absolutely stupid. First of all, 25,000 soldiers. Bill O'Reilly, where the fuck did you get the number 25,000? What is that based on? The fact that they need to function in 2 or 3 different theaters of war at the same time? Did you even consider that? How many with the logistical support? And what does that even mean to you? Are we going to be flying like resupply missions for them? He has no idea.
What's also really fascinating to me is whenever it comes to the question of terrorism, right? We never really address, or people like O'Reilly never really addresses the type of terrorism that the U.S. government does. So when we're doing drone strikes that kill innocent civilians abroad, right? Don't you think that the people living in the Middle East consider that terrorism? Yeah. Don't you think that those innocent women, children, men who are at weddings, who aren't doing anything wrong, who get murdered as a result of our U.S. foreign policy, don't you think that those family members and those victims don't see what we're doing as terrorism? I mean, like, think about how this is all a symptom of a much bigger issue. And the bigger issue is that people continue to die in our counterterrorism efforts, innocent people. That leads to the aggression toward the United States. That leads to the hostility toward the United States. That leads to the increased recruitment to these terrorism groups in other countries. So instead of addressing those issues, he's talking about freaking mercenaries.
Yeah, and just to make clear, so Anna said this, you can't support mercenary armies under UN law. The U.S., as it often does, did not actually sign on to that international treaty, but that is international law right now. Obviously, it gets a little bit complicated when you start talking about private military contractors and things like that. It seems illegal to me, but all the sources I looked into played away with fancy wordplay and stuff like that. But yeah, like he can call it the anti-terror army or whatever. That sounds like something a child would think up, and he apparently is functioning at the level of a 5-year-old when he's thinking about his anti-terror strategy. But all he's saying is we're going to pull people from Afghanistan and Syria and Italy and Scandinavia, bring them here and train them and arm them, because for some reason training them overseas would not actually work. You got to train them here. We're going to teach them all English for some reason. They all have to speak English. Who the hell knows why, since they're going to Arabic-speaking countries for the most part, perhaps in somewhere where they speak Farsi. But for some reason they have to speak English, which seems like just a dog whistle to Republicans like no other.
No,
strict discipline, though. Strict discipline. And they sign a contract. So when we take them over to Syria, they're not just going to skip away with all the money and weapons we've given them. They signed a piece of paper.
Exactly, right. And look, again, what he's doing right now is he's feeding into his audience, the paranoid, supporters that he has. This is what they want to hear. They want to hear that politicians or commentators are going to be tough. They're going to do whatever it takes to protect national security. Although at the same time, really just give me a description of how these terrorist groups are an imminent threat to the United States. Tell me. Give me their strategy, tell me exactly what they're going to do, and then maybe I'll buy into the fear-mongering, right? But at this moment, all it is empty, shallow, hollow fear-mongering. There's nothing more to it.
And look, he admitted last week, he said when he was speaking with, I believe, Megyn Kelly, he said, when I saw the beheading video, I didn't react intellectually, I reacted emotionally. I was horrified and I was angry. I wanted to take a bazooka and blow them off the face of the world. Well, perhaps we should have somebody who is designing and implementing our counter-terror operation around the world who is not responding in a purely emotional fashion, who actually thinks for a couple of minutes about more than just the name of this fictional, fantastical army before he goes on the air and starts describing it. But what do I know? What do I know about the military or war? Although now that I think about it, I have talked about Iraq, Afghanistan, the Ukraine, and the war between Israel and Gaza. That's 4 wars covered with this pen. You talked about it too. That's 8 total sort of wars covered by us. I think we outrank them now.
Wow, we've covered 8 wars with a pen.
Total. And there were probably some smaller, like Libya. Fine, 5. We got you beat, O'Reilly.
Damn.
Anyway, before we move on, let's just go to the last one. He gave an update on this on CBS the following day.
These guys, there's just a million of them. They just pop up, whether it's Yemen or Somalia or here or there, and you just can't have this unwieldy apparatus saying, well, maybe we'll get them, but maybe we have to go over here. You have to have a central command, an authority to fight worldwide terrorism, and we don't have it now. And I don't think we have the will yet. It's going to take another 9/11 attack for the world to get the will.
Why don't we address why these terrorist groups are popping up
They
all over the place?
just pop up.
They just pop up out of nowhere.
Yeah.
It's just random.
It's from too much moisture, I think. It causes them to pop up. Not in response to economic problems.
Instead of addressing that, instead of addressing why you're seeing the emergence of certain terrorist groups, you just decide, no, we're going to create a group of people that are going to fight against them.
It does make sense. I mean, look, this is the side of the political spectrum that does not understand how causal mechanisms work. If you drop a bomb on a village and then a couple people from that go on to support a terrorist organization, just popped up.
Out of nowhere.
Out of nowhere. Okay, before we go to our break, let's cover one more story. We're going to switch it up a little bit. Rand Paul has gotten a lot of credit. I think...
You all right?
I drink a lot of caffeine today. Can you tell? You couldn't tell, but I threw my pen across the room. Let's rewind for a second. Let's do that over. Rand Paul has gotten a lot of credit, and justifiably so, because he has not been advocating for the all-out worldwide anti-terror war that other Republicans have. And so he's getting a lot of credit for that. And even on this program, Cenk Uygur giving him a lot of credit. But in advance of the elections, don't get too fooled by what he says about foreign policy. We cannot forget what sort of man he is when it comes to domestic policy and particularly economic policy. And so thankfully, BuzzFeed has looked back into his past at some of the writings that he did while he was in college, writing for Baylor's The Lariat. And we've got a little bit of it. Now, I'm going to read a section of this, and I want you to try to figure out as I'm reading it, which economical and philosophical author was behind this ideology that spurred him to write this. So this is what Randall Paul said back in 1985. We have been taught as Christian people that it is wrong to steal, but underlying the whole welfare concept is the principle of theft. Money in the form of taxes is confiscated from the producers in society and redistributed to those who can't or won't produce. The immoral act of stealing, thus, has become moral in the eyes of society. Immediately I sensed the horror-stricken faces of those persons finishing the previous paragraph. Why, he would let the needy starve. My reply would be, how many realistic people believe there are 22 million Americans who need food stamps to survive? How many open-minded people believe 11 million Americans actually need sustenance? Let us assume a highly unlikely percentage, such as half truly need some support. If individuals were not burdened by taxes incurred by this wealth transfer system, the truly needy would surely be supported. Now, Anna, you're an open-minded person. Could you possibly believe that millions of Americans actually need food stamps and other welfare benefits?
I think that they're all making it up.
I think they're making it up.
Look, the fact that minimum wage is not a living wage and the fact that wages have been stagnant for quite some time while executive pay has increased tremendously doesn't really play a role in, poverty in America at all. So we shouldn't address that at all. But look, as you read me what he wrote in college, first of all, addressing the whole thing about Cenk supporting his foreign policy, I think
in this case,
in this case, politicians are mixed bags. Okay, everything is, there are gradations in all issues and in all politicians, right? So I see some of Rand Paul's policies, particularly his foreign policy, in some cases to be good. Look, he's against drone strikes and all of that. When it comes to his domestic policy, this is the kind of stuff that A, I'm not surprised by because he's been talking about this stuff for a long time. But B, of course I'm against, right? If you're going to address these types of issues, you got to talk about the entire system and why it is that people are dependent on government aid, right? It's not because, yes, there might be some people that are lazy, right? But the real core issue is you have these major corporations that refuse to pay their employees a living wage. That's why you're seeing fast food workers striking and protesting. That's why you have all of these very critical media reports on corporations like Wall Street. Well, Wall Street plays a role, but I meant Walmart. So unless you address those issues, you can't really talk about how there are too many people that are dependent on government aid.
Yeah, I love the arrogance of it, that this 18-year-old schmuck is sitting in Baylor writing editorials and saying, I don't think there's really 11 million Americans who are starving out there. And how do I know that? Because I looked out the window on the beautifully kept grounds of Baylor and I didn't see any of them. So how hungry could they be?
Well, and look, to be fair, all college students think that they know everything.
That's
right?
True.
And then you graduate, and then you go out into the real world, and you're slapped across the face by reality, and you realize, oh my God, I know nothing.
Yeah, you evolve, but he apparently didn't. He still believes. Look, I made a reference to an author before. This is Ayn Rand fan fiction that he was writing. He said, this is back in 2009, he said that he cut his teeth on Ayn Rand in high school and has read all of her novels. Now, that was in high school. In college, you see he's writing, this could be sections of Atlas Shrugged and The Fountainhead here, and he has apparently learned nothing because these are the same sorts of libertarian, fantastical economic policies that he's still pushing.
So at the heart of libertarianism, you have this obsession with deregulation, right? And the whole argument is you deregulate everything, you let the free market decide, and everything will be fine, right? That's just the way that it works. But every time I do a story like the story we did yesterday about the healthcare industry, right now there's a big problem in New York where people who are getting these major surgeries done go to doctors that are in their insurance network, and they know that their insurance companies will pay for it, right? But then in some cases, as they're unconscious on the hospital bed, the doctors will call in another physician that's out of the network, and then that person will come in, and then the poor patient will get hit with hundreds of thousands of dollars in some cases of bills from the out-of-patient physician. Now, the reason why I'm bringing that all up is because you need regulations in place to prevent that kind of activity from taking place, because who the hell can afford hundreds of thousands of dollars, right? But if you do away with all regulations and you allow private industry to do whatever the hell they want, especially considering the fact that they have a bottom line, then people are going to get screwed, right? So you have deregulation, you're going to get rid of minimum wage, you're going to get rid of certain things that help people earn a decent living in the country, right? And then you're going to sit here and argue that, we should do away with all government programs that help the needy. So what do you do?
You let them starve. The few that aren't lying, I guess.
I don't understand what his solution is.
I don't think that he has a solution. I think that he imagines, in the same way that he did in high school, that if you were to take away all these regulations, all these taxes, the economy would just rev up so much that every single person would end up in a top hat and a monocle. They'd all be so rich, or possibly they could fall back on the charity of churches or something like that. Which is great if you have it available to you, and churches do that sort of work. But let's not forget that there were churches back in the teens and the 20s and the 30s, before we had the social, the safety net that we have now. And one of the principal causes of death for those who were elderly was starvation and dying in the winter because they couldn't afford to heat their homes and things like that. But this motherfucker right here thinks that because somebody might be lying about not wanting to work, your grandmother should starve and die, and he won't even acknowledge that she exists as she does it. Look, it's great that he doesn't, in most cases, support drone strikes. It's great that he would deregulate our laws about weed or something like that, but he would fundamentally destroy America and how it functions, the way it's functioned, and the way it grew strong over the past 70 to 80 years. He would light that on fire.
By the way, when it comes to Rand Paul, keep in mind that he is in favor of the government totally getting out of the way of private businesses, corporations, yada, yada. But when it comes to certain issues like reproductive rights, all of a sudden, the government better freaking get involved and prevent a woman from getting an abortion should she need one. Which I find so interesting and inconsistent with his libertarian ideology.
Well, look,
and he'll make the argument that, like, the fetus has, you should protect the liberty of the fetus, right? Because the liberty of the fetus or zygote is much more important than the liberty of the individual carrying that fetus, which is not viable outside the womb.
Well, look, corporations are private, intimate things, not like vaginas. Like, you have to watch out for the corporations, but vaginas sail away or whatever. Anyway, okay, we're going to take our first break. We've covered quite a bit here. When we come back, we have a little bit of public opinion fallout from Ferguson. We also have Popeye, which we don't often have on the program, so I'm very excited about that. We'll see you in just a couple minutes.
Who wants to build me a website? Bueller? Bueller? Hello? Anna, baby, build me a website.
Jake, you're a grown man. You can't figure this out?
I can't. You're welcome, Internet.
Anna and John with you. We just finished a great first hour.
That was fun.
It was much more fun than I expected. I went to the Drake concert last night, which a lot of fans have given me shit for because they don't like Drake. Just because you don't like Drake doesn't mean I can't like Drake, right? And so I keep it real. I woke up and I was a little hungover, and I was like, great, I'm hungover. Now I get to read stories about ISIS.
Yeah, but so no, you were getting fiery.
You know, it's funny because as I'm preparing for those types of stories, it's obviously such bad news that you hate it. I hate, you know, having to read about it every single day. I mean, don't get me wrong, I love my job. I love learning about these issues and having an opinion, formulating an opinion about it. But it's sad news. And so you're not really looking forward to learning about terrible things that are happening abroad. But then we actually discuss it on the show and you totally get into it, you know? So it ended up being totally fine. But anyway, there will be a post-game show today. I don't know why I decided to plug the post-game at the beginning of the second hour, but I thought I would let you guys know, even though Cenk is away, we're still doing a post-game. Yesterday we had a great post-game with Ben and he was talking about his dog Bob, a girl dog. Okay, why did he name the dog Bob? And then I also had a really clever business idea, which actually has already been put into effect by organizations like the Humane Society. So figure out what that is. If you are a member, definitely watch that post game. It was fun.
I wonder what it is.
And I want to read. Some TYT lives to you guys. I actually loved this one tweet from Many Girl. She writes, "If we're going to declare war on the intangible," referring to ISIS and how they're not really an imminent threat to the United States for the time being. How about declaring war on weapons of fact destruction, and then in parentheses, i.e. Fox News?
That's pretty good.
Freaking love that.
I like that. That's going to be a master graphic at some point.
She would be great in our production meetings. And then also Jack McKinney? How do you say his last name? McKinney, right? Says, "Hey, John Idarola, I smoke a pipe, damn it. I like to point it at people as I answer questions."
That would be useful. I would like that. Imagine if I was to sit on the show smoking a pipe. I don't think that would work for me.
Yeah, and I think Skeletor Farnsworth said something about how I shouldn't be lecturing people on masculinity when I only like Latino men. That doesn't mean anything. That's just my race preference.
I don't
Doesn't mean anything.
I love it. Like you're like appealing. It doesn't mean anything, does it?
It's just what I'm into. Anyway, I was about to say sexually.
That's exactly what it is. Why are you don't have to hide that?
I don't know why I have that preference. I just do, but that doesn't mean that
they've never really done anything for me.
My fascination or my attraction to Latino men doesn't mean that I think that only Latino men are masculine.
Yeah, she likes to emasculate Latin men. Actually, that's what she does.
I don't like to do that. Anyway, all right, let's move ahead with some of the stories that we have for the second hour. There has been a viral video featuring a local news reporter in Anchorage, Alaska. She actually quit on air as she was reporting on marijuana-related issues. Now, I should note that in Alaska, constituents will soon be voting on a ballot measure. It's ballot measure 2, and it would legalize small possession or small amounts of marijuana possession for recreational use. Now, of course, currently we only have 2 states that have legalized marijuana for recreational use, Colorado and Washington, but as you know, it's probably going to have a domino effect, and Alaska could be the next state to legalize recreational pot. Now, Charlotte Green, who is the local reporter who quit on camera, is a huge advocate for marijuana legalization. So as she quit, unfortunately we can't show you the video, I'm going to tell you what she said. She says, everything you've heard is why I, the actual owner of the Alaska Cannabis Club, will be dedicating all of my energy toward fighting freedom and fairness, which begins with legalizing marijuana here in Alaska. And as for this job, well, not that I have a choice, but fuck it, I quit.
Damn.
So that's what she said on air. That was KTVA in Anchorage, Alaska. And of course, the video went viral. People were really happy that she did that. They thought it was a really courageous move. And now she's going to focus all of her efforts, as she said, on marijuana legalization. Now, she is going to be hit with some fines from the FCC. We'll see how that story develops and exactly what type of ramifications her resignation will have in the future. But she also released a YouTube video kind of discussing why she decided to do this in a very public way. Take a look.
Now, everything you heard is why I, the actual owner of the Alaska Cannabis Club, will be dedicating all of my energy toward fighting for freedom and fairness, which begins with legalizing marijuana here in Alaska. And as for this job, well, not that I have a choice, but fuck it, I quit.
There comes a time in each and every one of our lives when we must choose to continue to spectate or stand up for what's right. Why are Americans arrested every 37 seconds, Alaskans every 4.3 hours? Why should an aspiring someone lose their ability to earn a higher education to become that someone they were meant to be And why should you lose the ability to get public assistance in times of struggle and need? Advocating for freedom and fairness should be everyone's duty. I'm making it my life work to uphold what America stands for truly. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, ideals that now need to be defended. But I can't do this alone. I need you, in the very least, to start the conversation. Show them that we smokers are responsible, contributing members to society. Changing one heart and mind at a time is the only way to legalize marijuana and bask in Lady Liberty's glory.
So put that in your pipe and smoke it. I mean, I think that what she said was absolutely right. Look, my biggest issue with, marijuana prohibition is just this notion, and of course this is a federal notion, that marijuana has no medicinal value, which is why it's a Schedule I drug. Many people use it medicinally. Of course, a lot of people use it recreationally as well, but if you want to talk about the dangers of smoking marijuana, just compare that to alcohol and how alcohol is a lethal drug in the country, but it's legalized and regulated. Why should we keep marijuana illegal in a lot of states?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that drinking beer cures cancer and diabetes, right? So medicinal, you have to have that legal.
Right.
Yeah, it is ridiculous. So this video has been viral for a couple days. That's actually the first time I've seen it, and I don't know her politics, but doesn't she strike you as the sort of person who should be hosting a show on our network?
Yeah.
Like the fuck it, I quit. She just walks off. Oh my God, the ball's on her. She should have taken her mic off and dropped it.
So my absolute favorite part about that video wasn't even what she said when she quit. I actually loved the anchor's reaction to it. And again, we can't show you the video. It's a local news report that we don't have rights to. But she didn't know what to do. And it's because a lot of local anchors, actually all local anchors, read prompters, and everything is scripted and everything is so predictable. So when something went off script, she was like,
yeah. Well, that's kind of cool, actually. If she was dancing like that, I think that works.
Freaking out.
Yeah.
It was the best. That was my favorite part of the video. You guys should check it out.
And so obviously I like the sort of theatrics of it and all that, but I mean, what she says is great. I mean, I think she went a little bit overboard in the language, but it does need to be protected. It doesn't make any sense that it's illegal. They should be doing their state campaigns to legalize it. I do think that, I don't know if Alaska is going to pass. I do think that it's winning the polls, but I do think it's going to become more common over the next few years. It makes perfect sense, and she is doing what we say people should do. If you care about something, if you're passionate about something, you shouldn't let short-term economic concerns stop you from fighting for that passion. And she's going and doing that, and I hope that she's successful.
Well, there's a couple things on it. When she did it, she knew a way to make that work. Like you said, you wouldn't have agreed with the language. She kind of had to, or else people would be like, oh yeah, this anchor quit on air, whatever. People love to search anchors cuss on air on accent. Anchors mess up their teleprompter lines, which is what happened immediately after.
To bask in the light of Lady Liberty, that language. Like, I think you're going a little bit overboard.
That was, oh, you're talking about that language.
Yeah,
okay,
yeah,
I understand. Okay, I thought you meant the fuck it part.
No, I like that part.
Yeah, see that, because it was, when the whole thing came together, I said, this is her plan. She knew that people were going to search for these anchors. Oh my God, she cursed on air. Oh my God, and the anchor afterwards went. Well, we apologize. That's going to get people to look at it, and it's like it's the formula for viral, and so that was awesome the way she put that together. But number two, I mean, she did her own video, and wherever set it was, she can't get away from the anchor talk. She's still doing it. She's still, so she proves the point. You know, people say, do anchors go home and go, "Hello, dear, what's for dinner?" Like, but she does it. She does it.
That's one of the things that I address in my journalism class. I tell them all the time, even when you're reading your script, just try to sound like you're talking to your friend or your family members, you're explaining the story to them, because normal people don't talk like this. And so I actually found this great CNN video. CNN had this report on imports in Cuba, and the reporter had the most fake reporter voice ever.
Yeah. But did he walk slowly towards the camera?
Yes, he did.
Oh my
he
God.
did it in his stand-up. Okay, for our members, I'm gonna find that video and show it to you guys in our members-only section. It was like the funniest CNN video I've seen in a long time.
God, a lot of those videos, especially the local ones, they're a solo reporter that you send out.
Yeah.
Like, he sets up the camera on a tripod and then runs down the street a little bit and then turns around and then walks slowly towards it, talking demonstratively and dramatically.
It's hilarious. All right. Well, let's continue on with this drug war theme. This is not a funny story. It's actually a disastrous story having to do with raids. Police authorities in New Hampshire were investigating an oxycodone ring, and in the process of doing so, they did a raid on a home where a grandmother was shot as she was reaching for an infant. Now, police said that the reason why they shot at her is because they thought she might have been reaching for a gun. But let me give you the background to this story. Now, according to Raw Story, the U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration executed a search warrant on August 27th at the third-floor apartment of Lillian Alonzo as part of an investigation into this drug distribution ring.
Yeah.
Okay, so they did a bunch of investigations, a bunch of raids, and in previous raids, they managed to find about 1,600 tablets and about $58,000 in cash. Now, the reason why they were able to do a raid in this particular home is because the woman's two daughters, Joanna Nunez and Jennifer Nunez, were among the 9 people arrested in the previous raids. And there was an informant that alerted the authorities that one of the daughters had said that she had hidden some of the drugs and some of the cash inside Lillian Alonzo's home. So as a result, they thought, all right, well, we need to do this raid because we're going to find more drugs and more cash. Now, when they did this, they didn't find drugs, they didn't find cash, they didn't find anything, okay? But they decided to shoot a grandmother anyway. According to an affidavit, Jennifer Nunez told an accomplice on June 18th that she stashed her drug proceeds at Mom's, and a confidential informant told police that he saw $50,000 in cash at Alonzo's apartment. Now, according to Daniel Nunez, who is this woman's son, okay, she went to pick up the baby. They thought she was reaching for something, and they shot her. The bullet ripped through her arm and entered her torso. Now, thankfully, the woman has not died as a result of this. She's very lucky because we've reported on a number of raids where either innocent pets have been killed in the process of the raid, or an innocent person who has absolutely nothing to do with any type of drug smuggling or any type of drug trafficking also gets shot and killed. But nonetheless, she gets shot. The bullet is still inside her body, and she had to get, I believe, about 30 stitches as a result of this wound, right?
Yeah.
So, look, I bring up this story because think about how ridiculous this is, okay? People are getting shot, they're getting injured, wounded, in a lot of cases killed while these raids take place because they're looking for pills, they're looking for cash, they're looking for drug smugglers. This prohibition on drugs is so disastrous in so many different ways because not only does it lead to mass incarceration, but innocent people die as a result of it. And so are we ever going to start rethinking our drug policy? I'm not saying that, you know, getting people addicted to painkillers, which, by the way, the pharmaceutical companies do, is not a bad thing. It's a terrible thing, right? But the way that we deal with these situations does not help solve the problem at all. Innocent people are getting killed or injured in the process of these raids. It drives me absolutely insane. And they're also lucky that the infant wasn't harmed while this raid took place.
Yeah, they apparently didn't know or care whether or not there were children in there when they started firing. Yeah, it is interesting that for once this wasn't about weed or meth, that, you know, the biggest drug problem in the country is these painkillers that you can get legally if you want. People do get them illegally. For once, that was the target of the raid. But the whole purpose of this year-long police investigation is supposed to be to make the country better, to make it so that people don't get harmed as a result of these drugs. Is all of that worth a grandma being shot and possibly killed in the next raid? Is any of that worth it? And I just don't think so. And yet, we continue it decade after decade after decade.
The war on drugs is not and has never been about keeping the public safe or keeping the public healthy. That is the most disingenuous argument anyone could make in favor of drug prohibition, okay? What it's really about is ensuring that private prisons continue to make a profit, ensuring that, you know, the DEA still remains relevant. There are so many people that profit off keeping drugs illegal, right? And if you do away with the war on drugs, what do these people do for work? And this is their identity.
Give out tickets.
Yeah. I mean, that's true. That's true. I mean, this is members of the DEA and people who are like Obama's drug czar and all that other stuff. This is their identity. This is how they earn their living, right? It's ingrained in their culture and what they believe. And so if you say, hey, we're going to legalize it and regulate it, and they become irrelevant or their positions become irrelevant, I mean, that goes against everything that they want, right?
Yeah.
So of course we're going to continue having this war on drugs because people are going to make money off of it. And it drives me absolutely insane because people are being incarcerated and people are getting killed as opposed to getting rehabilitated.
Yeah. Yeah, and so, I mean, they're investigating the shooting. God knows if she's going to get money from the police. I imagine she probably will. I hope that she will. I mean, they're saying that the shooting was accidental, which is sort of true, but it's not totally true. It is an accident, but it's an accident that only led to her being shot because the gun was pointed at her because you were in her apartment because you were doing this unnecessary raid. Don't act as if it's just somebody knocked over a glass of milk. It's not that sort of accident.
Yeah. All right, moving on to Oklahoma. Police officials in Oklahoma want to let you know that if you're worried about local law enforcement possibly raping you or sexually assaulting you, you could avoid it by just following the law yourself. Now, to give you some background on this story, there are a number of police officials in Oklahoma that are facing charges of sexual assault and rape. One of those officials we actually spoke about on the show. His name is Daniel Holtzclaw, and he is being sued by as many as 6 women who allege that he either raped or sexually assaulted them. In fact, he has been charged with 2 counts of first-degree rape, 4 counts of sexual battery, 4 counts of forcible oral sodomy, 4 counts of indecent exposure, and 1 count of first-degree burglary and 1 count of stalking. So right now, he has not been convicted. However, he was arrested and he is facing these charges. And so this is just one case. Now there's another case. After a Tulsa County Sheriff's deputy was arrested last week for sexually assaulting a woman while responding to a 911 call, a Tulsa NBC News affiliate, KJRH, decided to ask the Oklahoma Highway Patrol how to stay safe during a traffic stop, right? Which is interesting, right? Like
that you have to do that.
That you have to figure out ways to stay safe from cops during a traffic stop. Now, here's what one police official told the local news outlet. We asked for an ID or a driver's license. If they can't provide it, rather than stand outside the car writing a ticket, which puts us in a bad location, we may ask a female back to the car so we can get her information. The captain says anything that happens inside a trooper's car is videotaped, and he says that supervisors do review those tapes. So he's basically saying, look, if you're anywhere near the cop car, you have nothing to worry about because we have dash cam, we have ways of monitoring the situation. Although sometimes, mysteriously, dash cams don't work, and we're unable to figure out exactly what goes on. He says the best tip that he can give is to follow the law in the first place so you don't get pulled over. That's Captain George Brown with the Oklahoma Highway Patrol.
Yes. When he gets fired for having said that, I think he's going to go into a new career in PR. That's not what you say, man. Like, those investigations are still going on into whether or not they did it. Like, he doesn't know that the officers are going to be vindicated in the end, and how ridiculous is he going to look if one of these cops does actually get thrown in jail for raping these women?
I mean, this is unbelievable. For you to say, like, well, if you don't want to get raped or sexually assaulted, just follow the law in the first place. That way you don't have to deal with the cops.
Yeah.
By the way, in one case, in one allegation against Daniel Holtzclaw, one woman says that he barged into her home, broke into her home, and sexually assaulted her, forced her to do oral sex on him. Yeah. Okay, so this cop, based on the allegations that, again, he has not been convicted of yet, I want to cover all bases, didn't even stop her in a routine traffic stop. He just barged into her home.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and he's using the fact that he's a police officer to shield him, and the willingness generally that we see across the country for these police departments to protect their own. And it sort of looks like they're doing that. I'm not saying that the guy who gave the statement to KJRH is doing that necessarily, but it is too easy for police officers to be seen to be callous and to not care about the people that they're serving in light of the constant police brutality we see and shooting people during drug raids and stuff like that. Like, you can't say stuff like this. You have to at least pretend to have some empathy for the people that you're protecting and serving. Yeah,
I mean, putting the blame on, you know, the person who's being stopped is ridiculous. Yeah, it's like, well, you know, if you don't want to deal with our rapist cops, then just don't break the law. That's how it works. It's amazing. Anyway, and by the way, just to be absolutely clear, yes, there are few cops in the state of Oklahoma that have been accused of sexually assaulting or raping women. But that's not to say that this is a virus within all police officials or police enforcement in Oklahoma. But these are cases that should be dealt with. And if you deal with it by placing the blame on the victims, then you're not really solving the problem. You're just making it worse.
Yep, totally agree.
All right, let's take a break. When we come back, more stories for you guys. I'm looking for something fun to plug because the next
That's
story,
not fun?
next story is disastrous.
Egypt parking?
Yeah, later on in the hour, I'm going to vent
Parking.
about parking. That's the worst plug ever. All right, we'll see you guys in a little bit. You liked that, didn't you?
All right, if you want the whole show, you like it even more, go to tytnetwork.com, go under member options, and you can get the whole show anytime you like.